So this is what it is currently doing outside of my house right now. There are about 3 feet of accumulated snow on the ground. We were all sent home from work early, so I figured today would be a good day to dive into the warmer weather vibes and finally make a video about the trip that I took to Greece with my friend over last spring break. Hello everyone, my name is Elizabeth. If you are planning on taking a trip to Greece in the future, I feel like this video will probably be helpful for you in terms of like planning and stuff like that. If you have never been to Greece before, I was really lucky in that my friend kind of like handled a lot of that, and she's very, very good at planning trips. So I got super lucky in that way, and I tried to help in whatever way I could, but planning is not my forte. But I mostly just intended this as like, you know, warmer weather vibes and like for you to like come with me and take a virtual vacation and maybe talk about some cool museum objects. All right, let's get into it. So first of all, I just want to say, especially if you live in Europe, going to Greece can be a very inexpensive vacation. So because we were coming from England, which obviously is a shorter flight, I think our entire trip cost £600 for each of us, which is maybe around like, at the time it would have been like $750 maybe. So in terms of like a week-long vacation, I feel like that's pretty inexpensive. And we definitely could have done it more cheaply too. Like we did stay in a hostel for I think 3 nights, but the rest of the time we stayed in hotels. So like if you did feel comfortable staying in a hostel for the whole time, like that probably would knock off about £200 off of that trip, or like maybe $300. So Athens has an airport that you can fly right into. It is obviously significantly outside of the city center, and the trains that run from the airport to the city center come very infrequently. Sometimes you'll have to wait like almost an hour for a train to Athens. So when we came out of the subway from the airport, we were just immediately able to see the Acropolis lit up. Akros means like high up in Greek, and polis means like city. So it's like the high up city, basically is what it means in Greek. First thing the next morning, we went to go climb up to the Acropolis. Go early, my children. Go early in the morning, as early as you can, like as soon as they open, because there are so many people. Like this is true of all of the kind of the big like sites in Greece. As soon as the like tour buses start arriving, they like it's flooded with people. Like we were probably up there at like 9:30 in the morning, and this is what it was like. So this is the temple to Athena Nike, and Nike being like the goddess of victory. So it's like much smaller and kind of on the side of the Acropolis. I brought my Pentax K1000 with me, which is like a film camera. It's like really nice and heavy for people who are like beginner photographers. And so I brought that with me, and I was shooting on, what was I shooting on? Kodak Gold 200 film, which I really liked, and I liked the way that my photos came out. So this is the Theater of Dionysus. So this was the kind of like main Athenian theater that was used for Greek drama. You can see it's got that like classic like semicircle shape, and like if you can't see from this photo, it was steep. Like it's huge and it is very, very steep. I would not want to climb down there. So the main temple on the Acropolis is called the Parthenon. Parthenos just means virgin in Greek, so the Parthenon is like the temple to Athena Parthenos, meaning Athena the Virgin, because she's a virgin. And you'll notice that that one is very not intact, and the reason that it's not intact, one of many reasons, is because the Ottoman Empire controlled Greece for a while, and there were a lot of wars involved with that, and they put gunpowder, they stored their gunpowder inside of the Parthenon, and it blew up, and so the whole roof of the Parthenon and everything was destroyed. Also, I believe that the Nazis used it as target practice at one point. So yeah. Nearby though, there is another temple called the Hephaistion, which is one of the most intact temples in Greece, and it is dedicated to Hephaestus and also Athena. It still has the roof on it, incredibly. Huge disclaimer before I show you guys the next part. So my friend and I, accompanied by a professor that I had in undergrad and a friend of hers, we were actually able to go inside of the Hephaistion. You cannot go into any Greek temple anywhere in Greece, so far as I'm aware, definitely not the Hephaistion. We were able to go in because my professor was actually working as a scholar on the Hephaistion and actually taking measurements of it. So she had special permission to be working there, and she was able to get us special permission to go inside with her. So I am going to show you guys some pictures that I took on the inside, but please know, do not go into a Greek temple if you are in Greece. That is very, very illegal. Also, even in antiquity, only the priests and a few dignitaries would be allowed into the temple. So it's not like people were worshiping in there the way that they would in like a Christian church or something. Most people would have been outside burning offerings, doing that kind of thing. It was turned into a church at one point, so the inside of the ceiling, the underside of the ceiling, is actually curved to kind of reflect that more Christian style of architecture. They added some doors into the side of the temple. It would have had much more iconography. I think there was an Orthodox frieze depicting some saints that was unfortunately destroyed by people who were excavating there, like as in they barely even documented it and they took it down basically and completely destroyed it for some reason without making any attempt to preserve it really. But that being said, I do think that it's nice that this temple has been kind of restored to its original purpose of like being a pagan temple. The streets were so beautiful in Athens. I really wasn't expecting it. Like I have no idea what period these buildings are, but as you can see, pretty old-fashioned looking. So after we had finished at the Acropolis and the Agora, we went to the National Museum of Athens. Definitely recommend that. It's a fantastic museum. So this is the so-called Mask of Agamemnon. Hopefully we all know that Agamemnon is highly fictional and very unlikely to have been a real person, and if he was, he almost certainly did not have the name Agamemnon. But it's called that because it would have belonged to a king of this place called Mycenae in the Bronze Age in Greece, so the same kind of time period as the Trojan War took place. So they had a lot of geometric period stuff there, so not hard to see why this is called the geometric period. I find this period really interesting because, like, look at these faces, the way that they, like, the silhouette is so wacky. Like, what is this nose? But it's beautiful in its own way as well. I'm pretty sure this is Artemis because she's got a stag that she's holding on to. There was this cool Sphinx lady that I took a picture of, my husband. This was really cool. So this is the two women in white, apparently, if I remember correctly. The one on the left is a worshiper, and then the one on the right is Persephone, and then the one on the further right, who is painted in orange, is Demeter. This is probably from Eleusis, but to be honest, I don't remember. You can see they're wearing a ton of jewelry and that their clothes are very like elaborately decorated. So I feel like a lot of people, when they think about ancient Greek clothing, they don't always like kind of understand that actually, yeah, if you're wealthy or you're a goddess or whatever, you're going to be wearing tons of jewelry. Your clothing is going to be dyed bright colors. It's going to be embroidered. Like, all of that costs money. So that's kind of how you show like wealth and status. This is a statue of Demeter's head. It was so big. It was like huge. Here's Poseidon, who has not been skipping arm day. I love when they just like put the himation over their shoulder, but instead of like actually putting it over their shoulder, it's just like hanging out like right here. This was kind of cool. So I think I've mentioned something called a herm in previous videos. It's like, well, it looks like this. It's a column with a head of a bearded Hermes on it. This one for some reason had Dionysus on the back of it, who, as always, looks like a woman. So this was a statue that I actually wrote about in my dissertation. I was so excited to be able to see it in person because part of my argument is to do with her necklace. Like, a lot of people think that her necklace has pomegranates on it. I disagree with that because it was painted gold. So it just seems odd to me that it would be pomegranates because the paint was yellow and they had red paint, of course. This is a statue of a woman named Prasyclea. She died before getting married. She's holding a closed lotus blossom in her hand. That's probably like underscoring the fact that she died before she got married. There was an inscription on the base of the statue that says, "I am the tomb of Prasyclea. I will be called a maiden forever, having received this name from the gods in place of marriage," is what it says in English. And then in ancient Greek pronunciation, this would have sounded something like "Sema Prasyclea, skoreke klesoma ei, antigamo paratheon tuta lakosonoma." She probably like was a wealthy Athenian, and there were these two families in Athens that were like basically fighting with each other. And so the reason that she's so intact, and also you can see the paint on her still, is because they think that the other rival family took over, and so Prasyclea's family actually buried her statue in the ground almost immediately after it was made, and that's why it's so intact. They don't know if that's what happened, but that's what scholars think happened. So anyway, that was a tangent. So this was our hostel that we were staying in Athens. There were these orange trees like lining both sides of the street that we could see, like kind of look down on from our balcony, and it was so, so pretty. We had this cafe that was like our favorite like go-to cafe right around the corner that was called Cafe Leonidas, which is like the name of the Spartan king. It was definitely a chain. It was not like an independent place because we would see them elsewhere, but it was just really very good coffee. And we had these little like cinnamon ring things, cinnamon cookies that were so lovely coming from the US because it was just like a little bit of sweetness. So if you're somebody like me who doesn't really have much of a sweet tooth, it was just really nice to like have like a little bit of sugar, but just was not at all overwhelming. So we went to a thrift shop outside of the National Museum of Athens, and I found this shirt, which I had one like this in my undergrad that was just like a really cheap one from H&M, and I've always kind of missed it when I got rid of it. So I needed another like massive sort of peasant shirt. And then this like German thing. I think I found both of these for €6. So the second day we went to Delphi, which was incredible. And we were with a company that was like basically a small tour company called Ammon Express, and I would definitely highly recommend them. Not a sponsor, but it was one tour guide and like a minibus of like maybe 7 of us. So we all kind of got to know each other, which was really fun. And the tour guide didn't come with us into the sanctuary, so it was nice that we were kind of able to just like explore ourselves and not have to like just kind of like have the experience and not have to like constantly be like listening to somebody's commentary. But the tour guide was very, very knowledgeable and kind of talked to us about the site like before and after we like went to the site when we were like in the van. When we were driving up to Delphi, there's this incredibly steep ravine on one side. Like I can't even describe to you how steep it is. And honestly, I started crying. It was just like so breathtaking. So if you're gonna go to Greece, I would say absolutely go to Delphi. Like the one thing that you have to do is go to Delphi. But once again, go early in the morning because oh my goodness, as soon as the tour buses start arriving, it just gets absolutely flooded with people. Also, obviously, the more towards the off season you are, the better. So the story with Delphi, and the reason that it's called Delphi is because there was this serpent who was like plaguing this area, and the people asked Apollo to like come and sort it out for them. So then Apollo wrestled this serpent, and then once he had defeated the serpent, he went and he washed himself in a spring that is right there. The spring, I think it's called the Caledonian Spring. Okay, I can't remember anything recently. Delphi Spring. Castalian Spring. Where did I get Caledonian? Okay, the Caledonian Boar. That's the one. Anyway, so the Castalian Spring was where Apollo bathed himself once he had fought the serpent. And so he created this like holy place. And I think he was like riding on a dolphin at one point, which is why it's called Delphi, because it's like the Greek word for dolphin. So he like established this like temple at Delphi where there would be a woman called the Pythia, or Pythia in Greek. And she was originally a 13-year-old girl, and then they realized that maybe that wasn't such a good idea. So then it was a 50-year-old woman, or when she was chosen to be the Pythia, she would have been 50 years old. And she would sit on what's called a tripod inside of the temple and basically prophesy to people in this very kind of mystic way that was often quite difficult to interpret. So the Pythia would basically prophesy through Apollo. So Apollo would speak to her, and then she would speak to the priests of the temple, and then the priests would speak to the public. So people would bring gifts and all kinds of different things and set up like buildings and all this kind of thing as like an offering to Apollo, basically. And they would ask questions like, for example, should I invade so-and-so? Or is my wife going to have a girl or a boy? All kinds of different things. And the Pythia would give them an answer to the question that they brought. And famously, she was very kind of mystic about all of this. She's not often going to give you a straight answer so that there's kind of some wiggle room in case it doesn't turn out to be true. So if you've ever, my supervisor at one point, we were talking about a scholar that I was reading, and my supervisor was like, yeah, he is kind of Delphic, meaning like he's very difficult to understand. So if you've ever heard the word Delphic, that's what it means. It means like kind of like intentionally cryptic. At Delphi, there are several different structures. The main part is like the temple where the Pythia would actually have been, but then there's also this famous treasury that was built by Athens. Unsurprisingly, it's the only building that's still intact, is the one that was from Athens. There was also a like stadium, like a where people would run. And that was for the Pythian Games. So the Olympic Games, which were held in Olympia, were only one of 4 different ancient Greek festivals of games. So it would like move every year to a different place. So there were the Isthmian Games, the Pythian Games, the Olympic Games, and then I forget the 4th one. But that's why the Summer Olympics are only held every 4 years, is because the Olympian Games that were in Olympia were only held once every 4 years because it would move every year. There were these beautiful yellow flowers that I later found out were, or I guess I used my like Seek app on my phone. It's called white mustard, weirdly because they're yellow flowers, but they were all over the place and it was absolutely breathtaking. I always kind of associate Apollo with the color yellow, so it was just like a really cool experience to have. Oh, and I think this was Apollo, to be honest with you. Everybody asked me afterwards when we got back to school, they were like, did you ask a question of the Pythia? I was like, no, I didn't really think to ask her a question. In antiquity, they had this kind of idea that when Christianity started to take over and the polytheism religion started to kind of be taken over by Christianity, the Castalian spring actually dried up, and that was taken as a sign that Apollo had left Delphi and he was no longer there, and therefore the Pythia would not be able to like speak for him. So I don't know, I was just like, well, Apollo's probably no longer in Delphi, so I'm not gonna ask the Pythia a question because there's no Pythia here. By the way, instead of retiring, I've decided that when I get to be 50, I'm just gonna move to Delphi and become the new Pythia. Also, you've probably heard this before. One explanation for the kind of hallucinations, for lack of a better word, of the Pythia is it's thought that there potentially is some kind of a fissure at Delphi where some kind of gases from inside of the earth were coming up and causing the Pythia to be to like hallucinate basically, and so she was able to like, you know, have these kind of prophetic visions or whatever, and then people would sort of interpret what she said as like, you know, coming from the god Apollo. So there's a museum next to Delphi. It was definitely worth a visit. Just so much cool stuff there. I think that this is a depiction of the gods fighting in the Trojan War. I didn't take pictures of any of the plaques, so like, to be honest, I could be completely making this up at this point. So this is Cleobis and Biton, who are 2 very famous statues of the Kouros type. That just means young man. I liked this little, I guess it's a kylix with Apollo in the middle. I just thought it was cute. He's literally, this is like the original man bun. I also think it's cool that they had, you know how like Victorian bathtubs have like claws, like Greek chairs would have claws on them as well. You can see it here. So the tour company that we were with took us on the way back to this beautiful village on the cliffside called Arachova. I'm gonna really butcher the Greek pronunciation, but I had something that was apparently like a local thing called rooster and wine sauce. There was this very steep staircase that we went up, and then at the top there was this beautiful Greek Orthodox church. Ooh, we went to this cave on the way back. I forget what the like story was with the cave, but I just thought it was really cool. It was like kind of creepy looking, and the inside was like so colorful and awesome. So then we went to dinner in Athens. It was just really beautiful to be there at night, and you're just like literally right on the street basically. So then the 3rd day we went to Aegina, which is an island off sort of off the coast of Athens. It took us about an hour and a half, I think, to take the ferry there. It's probably a couple of miles across. It's not a huge island. We went to a sanctuary of Apollo when we were on the island, which again, they had very beautiful yellow flowers growing everywhere. Unfortunately, only one of the columns of this sanctuary is still remaining. By the way, for reference, most of these sites you do have to pay to get into, but it's usually not too expensive. Like I think this one was like €2 or something. So when we got to Aegina, we had lunch there, and it was like a cool experience. I don't speak any modern Greek, but I'm pretty sure that there were like some older guys on the table right next to us who were like arguing about the Odyssey, I think. This omelet was like the best omelet I've ever had in my life. It was like, they must have used about 6 eggs, and it was like so kind of light and fluffy. My favorite thing that we did on Aegina was we went up to the Temple of Aphaia. So people don't know quite who Aphaia is. My friend was telling me that she is supposedly kind of like Athena. Like some people think that she was basically Athena, but it's kind of unclear as to like who exactly she was. If you do get out to Aegina, I would definitely recommend going to this temple. You get like a 360-degree view of the island, which is beautiful. There were so many cats at all of the sites that we went to, like stray cats and dogs. So we walked back from the Temple of Aphaia instead of taking the bus, and I was so happy that on the side of the road I saw some asphodel growing, and it was so cool to like see that because I'd never seen asphodel in real life before. And it actually is very tall. Like on me, it came up to my waist. So then we flew to Crete. Our flight from Athens to Crete was actually more expensive than our flight from London to Athens. So that's something to be aware of for sure. You can take a ferry to get to Crete, but it will take you around like pretty much the whole day, whereas to fly only takes about half an hour, and it was a very easy flight, although we almost missed our flight. So something to keep in mind if you're going to Greece around like in March is Greek Independence Day. So there was a demonstration in, I think it was in Syntagma Square, and so that subway station was shut down, and so we missed a connection because of that, and it was only by a few minutes, but because of that we wound up missing a train that only ran every half hour, and because of that we like almost missed our flight. I mean, it wound up being okay, but we were like there like, you know, a few minutes before they started taking people over to the plane. So that's something to keep in mind. Also, when we got to Crete, it was the day after Independence Day, and it took them until like midday to get electricity back. And what that meant was that there were no ATMs, and we weren't able to buy tickets to go to Knossos online because they won't let you buy the ticket online if it's the same day. So we luckily ran into another tourist who spoke English, who actually had rented a car, and we all drove to a nearby hospital who did have an ATM, and so we were able to pay in cash and go into Knossos. But just like, let that be a lesson to you. Definitely carry cash on you at all times when you're in Greece, and just know that with Greek Independence Day, like a lot of stuff is going to get shut down. So I definitely recommend going to Crete. Crete was awesome. Heraklion is like the kind of main city that you come into. That's where the airport is on Crete. There were just like people playing music in the street. It was like very lively. A lot of like kind of bigger like chain shops and restaurants, which was interesting. We had some fantastic food there. There were a lot of really cool Greek Orthodox churches as well. My friend who I went with is Greek Orthodox, so we actually went to a service at one point, which was really interesting. So I had been looking for a bracelet with an evil eye because my aunt had an evil eye that unfortunately was either stolen or got lost at some point when she was going back and forth through customs, not in Greece, but in between the US and the UK, because my aunt lives in the UK. So I wanted to get her a replacement for that, and so I'd been looking around in shops to buy something, and I wound up buying this one, which was described to me by the shopkeeper as being the Eye of Zeus and being a little bit different from an evil eye. I have no idea if this is true or not, but what he said to me is that the evil eye is considered to be, amongst other things, an Islamic symbol, and also I think maybe a Jewish symbol as well. Sorry, I'm saying so many things that people are gonna at me and be like, this is wrong, so I apologize. Whereas the Eye of Zeus is like more of a pagan symbol, so if you are Greek Orthodox, you're allowed to wear it because it's pagan, as opposed to belonging to like another like much more widely practiced religion. So he actually made a really interesting comparison. I thought, he said like, oh, you have the eye as well in the US on your dollar, on top of the pyramid, you have the all-seeing eye. And so it was so interesting to me that he was making that connection between the like evil eye or Eye of Zeus or whatever you want to call it. It's called Mati, I think, in modern Greek, that you see all over Greece, and the all-seeing eye in the US. That was like so interesting to me. So he explained to me that the eyes on the tail of a peacock are like the eyes of Hera watching over families, and I didn't realize that that is maybe one reason why Hera is associated with peacocks. And it was so cool because then the next day we went to Knossos and we almost couldn't get in because of the situation that I described with the like ATM and everything, but I really wanted to go. And so we finally got in and we walked in, and the place is crawling with peacocks. There were male peacocks, female peacocks. I just like walked in and looked up, and there was this beautiful male peacock just like walking around doing his thing. They were like pigeons, like so unbothered by people. I guess this peacock has several lady friends kind of hanging out with him. So before I talk about the palace at Knossos, a little bit of background. The Minoan civilization, who were the people in the Bronze Age who established the palace at Knossos, they had a lot of naval power and they were very good at defending themselves, so they weren't kind of worried about like having a palace that is like very fortified and like difficult to get into. So what they did instead is they had like kind of this sprawling sort of palace that had all these rooms kind of on one level, and that's part of the reason why when you look at it, it looks like a maze. And this was the location where supposedly the Minotaur lived there, and Theseus like comes and defeats the Minotaur, and he has to go into the maze, and Ariadne like gives him the string so he's able to like find his way out again. So one reason like why that myth was set in this particular place is because if you go to the palace at Knossos, you'll see it totally looks like a labyrinth. Even though they had signage kind of like directing you where to go and like, you know, ropes to kind of show you where you can go next and stuff, it still was the most maze-like place I've ever been in my life. So I think that this was like the queen's room. It has all these beautiful dolphins on it. And then this is like the famous throne room at Knossos where the, I guess, king would have sat. So you cannot miss the museum in Heraklion. It is so beautiful, and they have obviously like more Minoan stuff than you could find in any other museum. I find the kind of decorations that Minoans would put on their pottery so incredibly beautiful and detailed, like especially the way that they draw like octopuses and like seashells is just so detailed and beautiful. Also, these are literally coffee cups from 1800 to 1700 BC. So this is the famous Minoan snake goddess. The Minoans, as you can see, the women would be bare-breasted, and they had these very like kind of funky looking skirts. And so the snake goddess is maybe kind of an earth goddess. It's not 100% known like who she is. I asked the shopkeeper that I spoke with, his name was Marios, who he thinks she is, and he said, oh, it's Pasiphae, who is the wife of Minos, but she's a sister of Circe and a daughter of Helios, so she's a goddess. They had a ton of jewelry. I love looking at like Bronze Age jewelry. It's just so beautiful. Like it literally looks like something you could find in a thrift shop almost. We were about to leave the museum, and there was this part downstairs on the lower level of the museum there, and I walked in, like we were literally almost gonna like even leave without going in, and I walked in and I just see like the most complete statue of Hades and Persephone like anywhere in the world. I have to say, I do think that they did a slightly better job with Hades than Persephone. I feel like Persephone's face looks kind of small. I could do better, but anyway. So yeah, there they are. As you can see, as I've said in many of my videos, Kerberos is not a massive dog. He literally is a normal sized dog. Obviously, you're not going to sculpt an enormous dog if you are a sculptor because your stone isn't big enough. I get that, but he's a normal sized dog. When I was on Crete, I also found this bowl. I just like saw this and I was like, I need this. I love how there's just this cat sitting in the airport when we got there, just like chilling out in the like departure lounge. So there is a museum by the Acropolis called the Acropolis Museum, which I believe was actually built specifically to house the Parthenon marbles, also called the Elgin marbles, which were stolen by the British and put in the British Museum and are one of the main attractions to the British Museum. I will keep it short and sweet, but as some of you guys know, I am very against the Elgin marbles and many other artifacts like the Benin bronzes, etc., being in the British Museum. The British Museum is free for a reason. I feel that those marbles need to go back urgently. Also, please don't use the word Elgin marble. That's sort of slightly politically incorrect. Like, you want to say Parthenon marbles rather than the Elgin marbles, because Lord Elgin was the guy who like looted them from the Parthenon. But anyway, so there's a whole museum in Athens where you can go and see this. I believe that it's free for people who are under 25. This was my favorite thing there. It's a replica of what the Parthenon marbles would have originally looked like, because obviously they are incredibly damaged, unfortunately. So it's really hard to see and imagine like what they would have actually looked like. So I love that somebody actually took the time to make a little replica of them, and like you can actually see what the ancient Greek people would have actually seen. So it's depicting the birth of Athena. She like sprang out of Zeus's head. I know that like the artist probably just like wanted to include all the gods in this scene anyway, but it's kind of interesting to me that it sort of implies that like Hermes and Persephone are like older than Athena. Like, I always think of Athena as being more like one of the older goddesses, but it doesn't seem like that because they're literally present at her birth. His lightning bolt looks to me like an ear of corn. I was really amazed how, at least when we were flying over Greece and when we were like driving through it and stuff, like a huge amount of it is pretty much untouched. I was kind of surprised like how much of it is actually really intact in terms of like, it's not developed, it's not farmland, it's not suburbs, like it literally just looks pretty much wild, you know, maybe with some houses kind of scattered here and there. But coming from England, where like the entire island is housing developments and agriculture, like it was kind of a nice change. If you're interested in the places that I would recommend where we stayed in a hotel called Hotel Lina when we were on Crete, and in Athens we stayed in a hostel that was called Athens Backpackers. We had good experiences with both of those, apart from the fact that one thing I didn't think about when you stay in a hostel and you're sharing a bedroom with 5 other people is if one person is snoring or gets home very late, then the rest of you also are staying awake, which was kind of frustrating because we had some early mornings, and like not getting a good night's sleep is definitely something that can be frustrating when you have an early morning. So yeah, I think that is all I wanted to talk about for this video. I hope that you guys enjoyed seeing some of my photos from Greece, and I hope that you're able to get to Greece at some point in your life. It is a beautiful country full of very, very friendly and lovely people, and I'm working on my modern Greek very slowly, but it's it's kind of slow going, but I hope one day to be able to go back and like actually speak Greek to people there. All right, that's it for this video. If you liked it, please give me a thumbs up, and you can subscribe to see more content like this. It's also super helpful if you guys leave me comments with what you'd like to see in the future, because I have my ideas of what I'd like to film, but also you guys have your ideas, and I want to be able to like deliver the kind of content that you want to see. I also make comics over on my Instagram and TikTok, so you can follow me over there if you like comics about authentic-ish Greek mythology. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in another video.